basically 411 here, coming straight out of Boise, back at you with another YouTube video. And in this week's YouTube video, we're going to be talking about the Jesus of Siberia, also known as Fisari-san. Due to the fact that I'm having an issue pronouncing his name, we're just going to be calling him the Siberian hobo, formerly known as Sergei Tarap, which is some Russian name, who in 1990, while the Soviet Union was falling and the Russian Federation was becoming a thing, so in other words, everything was changing from the Soviet Union to what I guess would be the current climate in Russia. Anyway, he had a vision that he was, well, not really a vision, but more of a revelation that he was Jesus in reincarnation, and pretty much that he needed to start his own, I guess, religion, which it's kind of weird because, during this time, religion was, before this, the fall of the Soviet Union, religion was actually kind of looked down upon. Really, it was state-sponsored atheism. So as a direct result of the Soviet Union collapsing, I guess, religion was becoming a normal thing. And as a direct result, a bunch of these cults started to appear. And I guess between religion becoming, I guess, more open and the fact also that, people really didn't know what was going to happen to them, I guess it offered opportune times for people to start cults, and I guess this guy just decided to start his own cult. The religious practices that this guy has essentially jacked is actually a rather interesting mix. It's really Buddhism and Russian Orthodoxy and I guess other what we would consider New Age beliefs, pretty much all thrown into a hodgepodge with a little bit of his own stuff. With his own stuff being the fact that the guy actually wrote a brand new Bible that they call the Last Testament, and essentially that is the group's holy book, which the fact that this guy, I guess, wrote his own Bible is really clearly a huge red flag. How many people can say, wrote their own Bible? Not that many people. That's absurd. You're already taking a messed up, I guess, piece of literature, and essentially you're adding your own, I guess, twist on it, which is really absurd. And if anything, as we'll see, I guess his beliefs, or what he, I guess, imposes on his believers, is really absurd. Some of it actually kind of, I guess, makes sense. In a religious aspect, no drinking, no smoking, and I guess the veganism to a certain extent. But then it just gets completely absurd. So, for example, one thing that this guy essentially has done was he took all of the major, I guess, religious holidays and replaced them with, I guess, stuff representing him. So, for example, they don't celebrate Christmas on December 25th. Instead of celebrating Christmas, they celebrate the guy's birthday, which is completely absurd. That's extremely narcissistic. It makes no sense. And then also, really, you don't know that this guy's Jesus, but somehow he's manipulated people into believing this. Also, another thing that this guy does is he essentially has, I guess, taken control of his believers' thoughts, and the fact that you're not allowed to think anything negative. You're not allowed to fight. Everything has to be, I guess, positive. There's no disagreement. And if anything, this belief has actually gone extremely far, to the point where, on their compound, which we'll get to the compound here in a minute, and they're picking crops, I guess, to farm, essentially they have this list. Well, they always end up picking the first thing that's on the list. And the reason why is so then this way they don't cause, I guess, negative stuff and fighting along the group, which is a real big issue because as a direct result of them pretty much, I guess, picking the same thing over and over again, there's been times where the harvest was really, really shitty, which in turn, I guess, made things really, really bad for them on the compound. Other things that I guess the guy makes his believers do is the fact that pretty much they have to give everything to this hobo. They have to give everything up. Even the money that they make, they have to give it up, which is really, really sad. Also, I guess some things that this cult does is, they don't look down on suicide, which is really, really weird. Like that. And then also, sharing, I guess, the Branch Davidian belief. They pretty much believe that the world's going to be ending, which, if anything, I guess all that stuff just shows, yeah, this is probably a cult. Let's get started on the compound. So when you first see this compound, I kid you not, it looks like some shit that you would see off of the movie Midsummer. The only difference is without it being, I guess, pagan cult. It's this really weird New Age cult. And then there's I guess the whole history of how his cult compound started, also called the Adobe of Dawn, I believe. Uh, so he decided to start his compound out in the middle of nowhere, in Siberia, 2,000 miles away from Moscow and 300 miles away from the Mongolian border. Uh, Pretty much out in the middle of nowhere, so I guess they couldn't necessarily keep track of what he was doing, and he just wanted to be left alone. Which, as a direct result of him pretty much being out in the middle of nowhere, it has essentially given an environment to where he, I guess, could thrive and where this cult could thrive. Whereas when you look at what has happened with other, I guess, cults in Russia, such as you could say the Jehovah Witnesses and the Mormons, uh, the Russian government has essentially clapped down on them. Pretty much made it really, really hard for these people to, I guess, really believe in their harmful stuff. Let's fast forward about a couple decades later. This cult compound is actually one of the largest, you could say, cult compounds in existence. It makes Jonestown seem like a little like trailer home. Um, it's comprised of, I guess, a couple villages in Siberia, and it has 4,000 people. That's about 4 times more people live in this area where this cult is situated at than what was living in Jonestown when they decided to do like their whole mass suicide. So it's a pretty big compound. And essentially there's 3 parts. So you have like the villages, and then you have this other part, and then there's where I guess you could say the leader lives. He lives on top of a mountain where in this like little community where he has a bunch of like close followers, you could say. He actually has like you could say his own personal guard that protects him from things and also acts as like spies, uh, you know, regular cult things, you could say. Which now brings me to life on the compound. So life on the compound is actually really really simple. That was I guess the whole point of him coming up with this community was to live the simple life. Really, what you're doing is working, doing all that stuff, housework and chores. And if anything, culturally speaking, it's really traditional. If anything, this cult is actually extremely, like, you could say, like, sexist and misogynistic due to the fact that they actually don't, they believe in, of course, your stereotypical gender roles, to the point where they actually have a school for men and a school for girls that they have to go to in order to, I guess, become productive members of their current society, going into their traditional gender roles. Where, if you go to the men's school, they teach you like woodworking and all that stuff, and then if you go to the female school, they pretty much teach you how to be a homemaker. And I said it's very traditional, which isn't really good in the current society, you could say. And just in general too, it really actually, in a way, I think dehumanizes females because essentially they're taught that they have no power, and that's really really messed up. This one would ask, well, exactly, why would you decide to join this cult, and what type of person would actually join this cult? So surprisingly, it's actually very mixed on the types of people that have joined this cult over the years. There's been lawyers. A famous musician, actually in a Russian rock band, ended up joining the cult a while ago, and is actually uh, the Siberian hobo's right hand man, you could say, and essentially lives with the Siberian hobo and helps him out with everything. Um, but it's really interesting, I guess, how cults, attract different types of people. Lawyers, people who you wouldn't necessarily, I guess, think of as joining a cult. When you think of, I guess, cult members, you think of people who are lost, young people, people who are just trying to find their way in the world. They've probably been through some really, really messed up trauma, but, in reality, it really can strike, anybody. And it's kind of interesting, especially given in the current climate. So, as a direct result of what's going on with COVID, you could say demands for joining this cult have actually increased, or that's actually what they say. We don't know. But apparently, as a direct result of COVID, people are wanting to, I guess, flock to Siberia in order to join this cult and to worship the Siberian hobo. Um, which, I mean, I guess it would make sense. You know, people are lost right now. Like, nobody knows what's going on. There's a crazy virus out there. Uh, and to be honest, a nice little, like, place in the middle of nowhere, seems like really, really a nice place to go right now. You're not bothered by the virus. But what has happened was the compound essentially has shut down. They don't allow outsiders because of the virus. But it would make sense why people would join, especially given the uncertain times and our current climate. And if anything, things are probably just going to get worse. But now, which brings me to what has happened on September 22nd, is the Russian government has, I guess, caught up to the Siberian hobo, and they decided to launch a raid on the compound with helicopters and the whole like kin caboodle. And they ended up sending what you could say would be the Russian equivalent of the FBI, the FSB, in which case they went in and they raided his compound, and they're charging him with an illegal religious movement and pretty much extorting money from his followers and also causing extreme mental harm due to the fact that there have been claims that he pretty much mentally abuses his followers. And also, even though I didn't really talk about this too much, it was reported that one of the reasons why his wife left him was because he liked a girl that was from, I think, Bulgaria or Belarus, one of the two, and she was underage. But that's essentially what he's getting charged with. Currently, he's going to be going to jail for, I believe, 2 months, and then when his trial actually begins, he's actually possibly facing, I believe, it's 20 years in jail. I could be wrong. You have to, I guess, research to see if I'm right. But if I do get that wrong, I'm sorry. But that's currently what's going on, which now brings in the question: well, what is going to happen to this group? Who knows? Hopefully, they're not going to try to Jonestown themselves, which would be a really, really bad thing. But who knows? Given 2020 and how weird it's been, who knows? That actually might be a thing that could happen. Which, once again, hopefully, that's not a thing. But anyway, I guess we'll have to see. Thanks for tuning in. Please in next week. This is So Basically signing off here. Remember, wear your masks, stay safe, and vote.